little bit during its budget workshops in October, knowing that TID 6 has lived its life. We have a decision to make now that we have to make, and that is whether we will allow TID 6 to close in full on time, whether we will subtract territory and close part of TID 6 and yet retain some of the increment for that purpose, or keep it open an extra year so that we can reclaim all of that increment and divert it to affordable housing and lead service line replacements. The Finance Committee didn't make a decision, obviously, but we did start to at least weigh what those three options were, so we knew what our choices were, and we'll continue that discussion tonight. Marianne, did you want to walk us through some of that detail before we take public comment or before we bring on anyone from Ellers?
Sure. I guess, the statutes do allow us to carry over 1 year of increment. When we talked about it last, we were using an estimated increment. The increment this year for TID 6 will be $4,087,000. That's the most up to date. Obviously, we have some unusual circumstances because we are going to be in the middle of a revaluation. So the assessor is looking at every single parcel in the city and putting a new assessment on it for this next year, and that would impact, obviously, the value of the district when we look at it. And it's really whether you feel justified to keep that increment 1 more year, to do some of the projects listed. It has to be for housing improvements. 75% of it has to go to affordable housing. The definition in the state statutes is their housing payments can be no more than 30% of their income, and then the rest is to improve housing stock. So I think during the budget process, we had a list of larger projects that community development was working on, as well as we all know lead line replacement is a huge issue within the city right now. And in talking to Quarles, we believe that that would meet the requirements as well. And, one of the reasons you would maybe want to make a decision to either reduce the size of the TID or terminate early really would be to just return the taxes to the taxing jurisdictions, the school, the county, the tech. So it's really a priority decision, I think.
Awesome. And I would like Director Brodick just to talk, because we had an affordable housing task force meeting on Friday, and we do have some guests from that task force that would like to speak to, but a little bit later. But Director Brodick, can you sort of give a snapshot of the projects that we had sort of pinned for affordable housing?
Absolutely. So we have 4 different affordable housing projects that we are working on right now. The first that I'll talk about is 415 South First Avenue, or the West Side Battery redevelopment. That is going to be known as Riverview Lofts, and Gorman and Company is the developer. That is a 56-unit affordable housing development. The LIHTC credits have been awarded. We have the development agreement in negotiations. There is a $1.75 million neighborhood investment grant that was awarded last year that would help supplement the cost or that gap of that program, or of that development. Construction is expected to begin this spring or summer of 2024. And we have up to approximately $550,000 of affordable housing extension eligible costs in that project. Thomas Street affordable housing infill is a potential project that we are currently awaiting on DNR Wisconsin assessment monies approval for site assessment. The second round of neighborhood meetings for that, additional input for the neighborhood to look at renderings that came out of our earlier visual preference surveys. Those are scheduled for tomorrow, December 6th, and next week on Monday, December 11th, both at the Riverside Park Shelter at 5:30. We are also working with Habitat for Humanity to construct a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom and 1 and 2 bath homes interspersed with the city-led development. This does have ARPA funds associated with it, and those were awarded for infill projects to do affordable housing. There are 13 parcels that we are looking at that could yield up to 9 homes as a combination of city and habitat-led development. As I mentioned, that's part of ARPA funds, and approximately 1.25 million in eligible construction costs, and $750,000 in post-sale eligible affordable housing extension costs. So that obviously could use some assistance as well. 700 Grand Avenue is a site that we put out for RFP last year. Commonwealth, as the developer, was awarded for their plan and a planning option was executed, and then an extension was also executed for 50 units of affordable housing. Commonwealth is going to apply for LIHTC credits in December of this year, so this month. We expect, because there are no other affordable housing projects in the city that we have RFP'd, unlike last year for them when they didn't get awarded, we are hopeful that their affordable housing credits or their LIHTC credits will be awarded and they'll be able to develop. But there is, regardless of either the developer or the project, there is a 110-year-old storm sewer that runs through the site and must be moved for any type of development that would construct basement or underground parking, which this 50-unit development would use underground parking. So the cost to move the storm sewer, the large-scale version of that project is approximately $1 million. And then the expected gap on project cost is approximately $2 million. Again, going back to Gorman, the reason this project has more of a gap on it is because Gorman was awarded their Neighborhood Investment Fund grant, covering a large portion of what Commonwealth was not able to cover because that grant was not available to them at that time. So the total eligible affordable housing extension costs are up to $3 million on that project. And then we are working on a new project in Sherman Street that's a replacement for the Wyatt Street project that was voted down at council earlier this year. Staff is working on appraisal of parcels, and CDBG funds would be used to pay acquisition if the negotiated price meets the appraisal value. The site would be home to a multi-unit residential development similar to what was proposed on Wyatt Street, so 6 to 8 units. We might be able to get 8 units on this one as opposed to 6 on Wyatt Street. Construction would be financed through ARPA, through that infill money that was awarded, and home funds, CDBG, and then an affordable housing extension if that's granted. We do expect a shortfall of approximately $300,000 to $500,000. That was anticipated with the Wyatt Street property, but because we don't have a site plan for this site right now, that's kind of an estimate. So we are looking at approximately $500,000 in eligible affordable housing extension costs. So with that, all of those projects, the potential total is $5.3 million. And I think an important reminder, Director Grote may have spoken to this earlier, these funds can be used throughout the city, which is very, very helpful to especially like a Sherman Street project or 700 Grand Ave, Thomas Street, of course, because we don't have a TIF in those areas. We wouldn't want to necessarily use one, and they're not in a half-mile extension. And then, of course, the lead service line replacement that we could use 25% of that increment to assist with, which has already been made a clear priority for this council. So we have a lot of potentially really wonderful projects for the city if we choose to extend this.
Thank you for that. There's certainly lots of work on the docket, obviously, all of which needs funding help. I guess at best case scenario, assuming that we would reclaim all of the increment and stay open in full for that year, we're dealing with a sum that's, at least today, just above 4 million, correct, is what you'd said?
Yes.
So somewhere in that neighborhood, that does go a long way to meet the total gap that Liz just outlined. Did you want to walk through what those 3 options would look like before we go to public comment as far as the partial closure, the full closure, and the
I think we
full
have
open?
Ellers on too.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So we could defer to Keith for that too as well. If Keith, are you on? Can you hear us?
I don't think our audio is connected.
Or maybe he's muted. Okay. We'll see if we can get him on.
while we're waiting for Keith to come on, I just wanted to say, I know Randy Pfeiffer, as our economic development manager, might also have some additional input that he would want to contribute, so
Sure.
just if there's an opportunity.
Sure. There absolutely is. We don't have Keith yet, so I guess, Randy, if you'd want to walk us through some points that, or if you've thought of something along the way, while we're getting the audio going for Keith, and then I think what we'll do is outline what those three options really would look like from a practical standpoint, and then we can go to public comment as well.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'll keep it short. I think at the end of the day, this discussion really comes down to the city and the council has emphasized affordable housing within the city over the past couple of years. We've been moving forward with that with a number of projects, but it always seems to come to the end of the day, where do we get the money from? The reason that we're working on affordable projects and the reason they're affordable is because they're subsidized in some way, whether that's from federal, state, or local money. We've done our best through LIHTC, the Neighborhood Investment Fund, to capitalize on some state and federal money. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to put some of our own money into this. If we can't, we choose not to move forward with the affordable extension, I think we really need to take a look back on what we're emphasizing in terms of that development. Because without that money, there's no way to make these projects happen, or at least nothing that we've found at this point. So I just think if we're not going to move forward with the affordable housing extension, we need to take a look back at what we're doing for projects overall and maybe shift directions on that. Happy to answer any questions as things move along. Thank you.
We have Keith now?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to join in because I'm not a host, because this is the ED's meeting. So unless they can make me a host to the meeting, yeah. Because Shannon's the one that set up the phone.
Okay. Can we bring Keith in by phone rather
See if
than
you have a
WebEx?
number, I can dial it
We
in.
could call him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, if you were going to think about doing a hybrid, it's really about, well, how much money do you want to allocate? So, it's almost like you back into the process. So we said, based on current values, the increment that would be available for low-income housing would be the $4,087,000. So if you said, yeah, we want $3 million, we would then look at the size of the district and carve out properties that would bring us to that number.
So you'd
That's-
roughly retain like 25%-ish, right?
Right,
So-
of value.
okay.
So I think, if you feel that the 4 million, as Liz and Randy have pointed out, can be spent on priorities of the community, which I think they've outlined, then your answer is likely you don't want to make any changes. If you don't feel that, or you want to, do something different, that would be the way you would do it.
So if you would only take a certain portion of increment, that would require the TID districts to be modified
Yes.
in that process. So how long is that process of that?
So we would have to go through and look at the values, and I think that was the point I was trying to make with the revaluation, that it wouldn't be necessarily an exact science because the revaluation isn't done, but we would look at parcels, and we have to maintain a contiguous map. So you would, look to the edges of the district to see what properties you could remove to really reduce that levy.
So then you would have to go back through Joint Review Board, Plan Commission, this
Yes.
committee, council? Okay.
Yes, and because we're doing a subtraction, even though we're over the value limit set by the state, we can still do it because it's a subtraction.
Okay. So either way, though, action is required. You have to take action to either stay open, partially close, or fully close, right? So
Yes,
have
in the,
So doing
stay
nothing
open-
doesn't default to staying open. You have to decide to stay
Right.
open?
And if
Okay.
you stay open an extra year, it's one resolution of council. If you want to reduce the district, it would be through the Joint Review Board.
Okay.
Closing would be a council decision too.
Carol?
Thank you. So if we allowed it to stay open and use that for some of the affordable housing projects, just so that I'm clear in my head, would that be allowed along with using some for lead service line replacement? And that would be for low income, correct?
Yes.
Like, do we know at all how many or not? Like lead service line replacement?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think that this would complement the,
Hi,
The
we can
chairman
maybe
of the
give
Water
you a
Commission
little.
is here.
Yeah, we can maybe give you a little estimate. So right now, we know that it's a high estimate, but we're looking at about $10,000 a line. So that's what we're looking, so however you divvy that up, we're seeing those come in a little bit less though, like maybe between 4,000 and 6,000. So you could invest in a lot more lead service line replacements here. And just a note, last week the EPA announced that we would have to replace all of them in 10 years, which is good for everyone. We were planning for 5 years, but this would help us get there faster.
Well, and we would be pairing this funding with whatever we are being allocated from the state and federal government outreach already, right? Because we've gotten some funding.
Yeah, so for 2024, we have a total of about 5.7 million. 2.2 of that is loan. The remainder is principal forgiveness. So for 2024, we would be looking at that 2.2 million based on what the DNR's allocation is going to be.
So I think you said anywhere from 6 to 10,000 per line. So how many lines do we still need to replace?
About 8,000 in the city.
$80 million project.
And how is it determined, like, which ones would be done? Or which ones would be done first? I know it's low income.
Right,
Right.
so it's, you know,
And
the
with children.
smallest areas that we can apply for are census tracts. So we're focused on the census tracts in the city and how they're broken up, low to moderate income, you know, different areas. And then the scoring criteria. So we're trying to maximize the amount of principal forgiveness in the early years. And as we branch out, you know, there might be more loan versus principal forgiveness on years 4 and 5. Yep.
So the order by which you decide to do them, though, and make the offers to people, that hasn't changed, though, right? So you had a priority within the commission that, you know, streets that were under construction first, right? And then, because you were offering them to people when you had the street already open, because it was easier to get at, or?
Right. So that's changed a little bit, but you're kind of on the right track. So now we're focused on where the city has already replaced our side.
Okay,
And so we're focusing on where it's just the private side in years 1 and 2. And the reason for that is we have to pay for all of the public side. And also, we're not allowed to do partial replacements. And so with the new lead and copper rules. So we want to try to get in those areas, you know, and minimize street disruption until we really kind of, being as this is the first program in the country in how we're doing this delivery method, we want to take a year or two to try to figure out all the kind of the nuances of this and this delivery method because in 24 we're looking at 600 to 700, and then the remaining years we're looking at 1,500 to 2,000 a year. So it's a significant jump.
so, and we'd be looking at maybe streets then that were recently reconstructed where we did our half, but the homeowner, you know, either
Yes.
wasn't able to do it or there was no grant money available for
Correct.
their piece?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes some sense.
Yep.
Alder Killian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess more comments than questions, so I won't keep you standing, Mr. Lindman.
Okay.
Thank you, yes. So I guess, you know, and I was at the affordable housing meeting as well, and I think there's a real desire to see these things come to fruition. As it's been said, there needs to be, you know, the requisite funding sources to do that. So I'm in favor of using the extension to fund affordable housing projects, but, you know, like with the 75% and 25%, you know, if we're looking at a little over $4 million with the 25%, you know, we've got maybe $1 million, a little more than that. And I think just given that type of sum of money, I think what would make a lot of sense and be very positive would be when we ultimately pull the trigger on this, we have a plan that is associated to the vote that's more of a, hey, maybe, but something a little more formal where we're attaching the monies to the project so that when we vote on this and we tell the Wausau people, hey, we're going to be using, several $million here, that we have something tight attached to actual specific projects. And I mean, we've gotten close. There's a list, but it's a little different than having a formalized plan and like a few PowerPoint slides. So there's a difference there. And so I'd like to see really essentially all of the 4 million go to affordable housing. And there's a reason for that in terms of the funding amounts and the percentages. So, as Mr. Lindman, the mayor, just described, so with the 25%, we've got about $1 million. The mayor just stated, this is an $80 million project in total with the lead pipe. So really, that $1 million, well, it sounds like a lot of money. When applied to something like that, you're looking at about 1.25% of the project, which, we need to keep filling that bucket to move the project forward, but it's a really anemic level in relation to the total funding need. However, $1 million when applied to affordable housing endeavors, now you're talking about something substantial. So I think there's a real difference when you look at the impact on the application of those funds and the 25% as $1 million. And then in terms of the 75% and 25%, as the Department of Revenue kind of describes on its page, it says that, 75% has to be used for affordable housing, and then you can kind of just throw the 25% into just a quote-unquote housing bucket. I think when we have this plan, it says on the DOR page, we can tighten up our definitions of what we're going to use it on. So when we come up with the plan, we could attach to a vote on.
Over half of our calls in the last 4 months have been for housing. And it's hard to tell these people that there just isn't any. And they call us because they think we have housing, or that they think that we can point them in the right direction. And certainly we do try to point them in the right direction. We have a great relationship with many, many landlords. But the truth of the matter is there just is not enough housing inventory. So I would love to see all of this go towards affordable housing.
Thank you for that.
Diane.
I guess I tend to agree with Alder Killian's remarks. I think when you weigh the impact of where the use of that money is, it's a larger share of the project if you use it for affordable housing than if you use it for lead service line, which has a number of other fund sources or similar fund sources. This is one way, this is one way that TID districts can be used specifically to benefit low-income neighborhoods. So because you can use the money anywhere in town, you don't have to use it anymore within the confines of the map. There's time where it takes an awful lot of time for the taxpayer to get the return on their TID investment. And if you're the other taxing jurisdictions, you probably don't love the idea of an extra year of openness with the life of the TID. But when you look at the impact that we as a community could make in neighborhoods that are not associated with the map that generated the growth in the first place, we could take that growth that happened in those other areas and use it in places that really need help, separate from the district where the growth occurred. And so it does make some sense that we would divert that funding to affordable housing and reclaim and use that extra year. And that is entirely within the municipality's control by state statute. We don't have to go through the board of review. We don't have to go through all these, machinations of the process that you would go through if you were trying to just pare down the size of the district and then do it. And then, walk away with only half of the funding that you could have realized had we just passed a resolution to stay open. So,
And I also think too, since some of the projects are dependent on ARPA funds, which have to be committed by the end of 2024, I believe, right? If we extended this, that would help get those off the ground, which, we obviously felt they were valuable enough to allocate ARPA funds for. And since the projects we want to fund already, swallow up all of the increment that would be generated, devoting an extra $1 million towards the lead line seems very, let's just focus it on there. But Randy and then Carol.
Yeah, and just one more thing in the conversation going on I wanted to bring up. talking about the extra year specifically. So this district was created in 2005, in May of 2005. Even with this additional year extension that we're calling it, it would still close on its normal timeline, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
So it would still close, it's required to close by May of 2025. So this would be within that normal timeline that we laid out when we first went forward with the district. I think that's important to note for the council and the general public as well as our partners. Because when we went forward in 2005 with the school district, with the tech college, with the county, there was that understanding that this would be tied up for 20 years. And we're going to be staying within that timeline even if we go forward with the full one-year extension. Thank you.
Oh, that makes some sense. And that district has really been an example of how, and in terms of growth, how a TID should work and how it should perform. That's a success story for us in TID 6. So
So I think Carol and then Chad.
Thank you. My questions before were, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding everything correctly. And while I definitely am all for replacing lead service lines as well, I do agree with Alder Killian that I would love to see as much affordable housing done with this, with funds that we have as possible. So I would very much agree. The need is great. Thank you.
Thanks. I heard a couple times that typically TIF money can only be used in the TID, but because but because we're opening it up, it can be citywide.
Yes.
Then okay. Do we only have 1 year to spend the money?
No, there is nothing in the statutes that discusses the spend down, just that you have to have outlined in your resolution what you're going to spend the money on.
Okay, and then so we're closing the TID early. Did it perform better, and that's why we're able to close it a year early? But this extra year gets us back to the 20-year.
Right. So, yep. So, by law, once you've funded all of your expenses, it's time to close the district.
Sure.
And so this year, meaning 2024, we will have recovered all of our costs. And so the natural process then is to close the district because we can't have any new project costs because we're beyond the expenditure period. So all of our projects had to be completed 5 years ago, or approximately 5 years ago, and so we would naturally have to close the district then.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
So, yeah.
just
it did-
learning all about
it
this
pr-
stuff
yeah.
and want to make sure I'm on.
And I would
know
add too,
everything.
TID 7 would be closing in the next couple of years too, so you would have an opportunity to look at that district at that time, and its increment right now is about $2 million.
so same process then, actually.
So weird question, since it was slated to close in 2025, we couldn't extend it to 2026? It only can be extended 1 year
1 year.
after we would have to close it.
Right.
So since we have to close it 1 year early, we can only extend it out a year past.
Yes, you can
Okay.
use 1 year of increment
Just
for
one.
affordable
And that's
housing.
after the debt repayment and whatnot has
Yes.
happened?
Yes.
Okay. Michael?
Okay, thank you. And I'm in general agreement with Alder Killian's comments also about using this money from the TID in its last year for affordable housing. I think that's been demonstrated that there are plenty of resources and avenues available for lead line replacement that we should dedicate this money exclusively for affordable housing. And I think it's important that we do have a plan on how we are going to allocate these funds, because I hate to see, us getting to a point where we have been in the past where affordable housing projects have been proposed, and then at the last minute, when they hit the Common Council, they get kiboshed for one reason or the other. So I think if there's monetary incentive tied to these plans in the nature of that TID funding, I think there's a better reason or need for those fundings, for those projects to make it through our process.
And it does seem to make sense also with the number of projects that we have in the hopper to solve some of this problem that we all have identified, that if we'd be able to fund those gaps, it really would seem like help things take flight, where otherwise they may stagnate. I mean, we may have spend down problems with the ARPA funds that we've committed if there's unfilled gaps and we can't find another fund source to fill them with. So I think this would help push those across the finish line. Doug, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Sure, a comment and a question for
Sure.
Mary Ann. Thanks Diane from NCCAP here to highlight some of the bind that they're in, but I'd also add, because I live over in East High Apartments, come March of 2024, the majority of those people who are on the Section 42 subsidies now will no longer be on that. So there's going to be another 30 or potentially as many as 40. Some have already left, but they're looking, and they've been looking for quite some time. So they're going to be in a crunch time, just adding to our demand already. And then to Mary Ann, to the points that my fellow alders already made, is once we earmark this money, if there's not a spend down time, how do you park that money, or what do you do with it?
So when we closed the previous district with a one-year extension, we created a separate fund for it so that we could track the expenses. So that's what we would do. So we would, isolate the funds, and we would be able to track how we're spending it.
And then I guess my other question to Director Broderick is, when you look at because I think you talked about 5 projects? It's Grand, Sherman, Thomas, West Side.
4, yeah.
Just 4. And then another TID closes in 2025, right? You said? With if we're talking about specifically earmarking and perhaps putting that in a motion, that we earmark these funds for the projects, what's the timeline of those, in order of?
I'd say, so Thomas Street and Sherman Street would be the first 2, because those have ARPA funds associated with them. So those need funds committed by the end of 2024, which is beyond a budget. That isn't a contract. So those 2 would be the most immediate needs. The next one would be Gorman, because they won't need, we're in development agreement negotiations with them right now. They are up to $550,000 that they might need, but likely not until 25 or 26. And then the last one would be Commonwealth at $700,000, because that would, assuming they get their tax credits, we would probably not be looking at development starting until 25, I want to say. And then 20, with probably a delivery 18 months after that. So it will be a bit of a timeline to those projects, but there's more than enough need lined up, as we've demonstrated.
Well, and for the purposes of our committee motions, it seems that it would make sense. I mean, really, the decision we have to make is stay open or not, and then the use. I think, though, if we want to articulate a priority of projects in order, we certainly could have you put that together for the council's action, because that'll happen after this. With that, do we have a motion because we have also 2 individual committee agendas, and we're running out of time at 6:30. So do we have a motion from within the Finance Committee to approve keeping TID 6 open for that extra year and reclaiming the entire increment for low-income housing?
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, sorry.
I'm going to make that motion with the proviso that a plan is drafted for allocation of those funds to be enacted upon by the Common Council.
Okay, so we'll make sure that there's a purpose and a hierarchy of projects attached when it gets to council, which probably is the meeting later this month yet. So, okay, so we have a motion from Martins. Is there a second from Finance? Second from Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. Finance has passed that item.
All right, so for ED members, would there be someone that would like to take the similar motion up that Alder Martins indicated? Alder Keeling.
I'll second the
Yes, I'll
motion.
make that motion.
Awesome. A second?
So I'll second.
Alder Larson. All of those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries by ED. Okay, so I guess we're on for our next 3 items. So item number 1 for the economic development agenda items would be approval of minutes from October 3rd, 2023. Would there be anybody that would like to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Move to approve. Alder Henke, second. Alder Lukens, is there any corrections or adjustments that need to be made? All right, all those in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes have been approved. Our second item is about the West Side Battery. So discussion and possible action on planning option extension for Gorman and Company at the 415 South First Avenue. So Director Burdick, take it away.
Sure. So Gorman is requesting an extension of their planning option agreement. As you see, we have granted two other amendments to this so far. Basically, what this does is allows them to line up their planning option with the closing deadline that we are negotiating in the development agreement. That has basically come to this point because we've had a lot of funding sources. This is a very varied capital stack that they're working with that had some timing components to when funds would come in and things like that. So that's basically what's taken us to this point. We do anticipate having a development agreement to another joint ED and finance meeting in January and council in that same month. So we shouldn't need this entire timeline, but we want to make sure that it lines up with our closing date should anything go awry in the coming months.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions for Director Burdick about this adjustment? Yes, Alder Killian.
I know they'd probably be unanticipated, but do we have a consideration set of possible things that could go awry at this point? Or there's been some bumps here. Do you think we're over the bumps now?
I think so. The financing that we had been looking at and how that would all call out is now settled. So that basically we're in the business term negotiation point of the development agreement. So the knock on wood, the hard stuff should be done.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Alder Rasmussen moves. Second.
I'll second.
Alder Hanky seconds that motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion for the extension has been approved. Item number 3 is update on potential Thomas Street infill housing, upcoming neighborhood input meetings on the 6th and 11th of December. Director Burke.
Yes, so we wanted to just update the committee and the public about the neighborhood meetings because it is a slightly longer anticipated timeline than we expected. So as you recall, we conducted visual preference surveys in late March and early April with a promise to come back to the neighborhood to look at the results of those surveys with some associated renderings that would have come out of that visual preference survey in sometime late summer to late fall. Those meetings are generally held on either the fourth or the last Monday of the month. It's later in the month. So we contacted the alders early in October with a request to get on the October agenda. There was already a presentation scheduled for that date. So we requested a November 27th meeting, which was granted. But then on October 22nd, we received communication that the 27th meeting would not work out. Then we later heard, I think it was in late November, that those November and December meetings were in fact canceled. So we didn't have time to put together another neighborhood meeting in a week. So we are planning on hosting, or we are hosting, neighborhood meetings at the Riverside Park Shelter at 5:30 on Wednesday, December 6th, so tomorrow, and Monday, December 11th. And both of those will have Spanish and Hmong interpretation and free childcare. But it's later than anticipated, but they are happening.
Any questions on updates? Alder Killian.
Just to comment, I think, in this round of outreach, as Ms. Brodick described, they were done in Hmong language and Spanish language as well, and I think that's very positive, and it's something we could incorporate into kind of relevant geographies when we're looking at things like this in town, so I thought that was a nice step forward. Thank you.
Awesome. So that being the last agenda item for ED, I think we can adjourn. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Alder Lukens, the second.
I'll second.
Alder Henke, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Economic development has been adjourned.
Okay, and so finance will continue. We have 3 fairly simple items on our agenda. The first one is to approve the minutes of our previous 2 meetings, 11/21 and 11/28 of '23. Did anyone note any adjustments that they need for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion from Denny, second from Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding updates to the 2024 fee schedule for EMS rates. You'll recall that as part of our budget process, we just finished approving the 2024 fee schedule, and immediately after that happened, our ambulance billing provider came to the fire department with recommended updated rates for 2024. So this is a straggler, but it would fit right into that fee schedule with a new rate for ambulance transports. Does anyone have any questions about that? Soon-to-be minted Chief Cop is in the back, I see. If you have questions for him, and the Finance Director, if you have questions for her. Otherwise, we would just accept these and update the rates for the billing as runs take place.
Yep, and then it would go to council at the next meeting, because the original one that you approved didn't go yet, so.
Right.
all
Oh,
of it
so it would
go-
just be substituted?
Yes, it would be
So their
all
first
together.
vote would be the
Yep.
right vote then?
Yeah.
Perfect.
On council.
No questions for staff? If not, is there a motion to approve the 2024 EMS rates? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. And item 3 is discussion and possible action regarding the lease contract with City County Information Technology Commission. And as you know, every year we lease space for CCITC to occupy their offices on the 3rd floor. That's what this is. Looks like this is a renewal of that.
Yes.
Does anyone have questions on the lease?
So just to add one piece
ahead.
of information.
Sure.
So the CCITC Commission this morning did approve the lease. They did authorize an increase of 3% for 1/1 of 2024, and then 2% annually during the next period.
Okay,
So annually.
excellent. And that's
for
what our
5 years.
proposal was to start
5
with,
years.
right? So,
Something like that.
yep. Oh, Director Klein, come on up.
Yeah, the other change we proposed was a 5-year
Yeah.
lease with a renewal of another 5 years after that.
Okay, so then we would consider this less often, which
Yeah.
lends some stability to their occupancy upstairs as well, so they're not constantly negotiating for their home. Does anybody have any questions for staff on this one? If not, is there a motion to approve the agreement? Motion from Lukens, is there a second? Second from Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that passes as well, and that's our last item. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Denny, second from Watson. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? No one's ever opposed, so we'll stand adjourned then. Common Council will convene in this chamber at 6:30. So we have a little gap in between, but that'll give us time to reset things for the meeting as well. Thanks, everyone.